No, that tells me to admit people. Okay, I can't believe we're doing this again. These 2 weeks pass. I mean, they say as you get older, life seems to move faster, but these weeks, months, some at this point, are happening way too fast. Way, way too fast. And it's really hard to believe this war has gone on for so long. Oops, 1 second. I see my microphone is in the wrong direction. So let's just turn to the right direction. Okay. So it's hard to believe that this has been going on for so long. Uh, Israelis certainly, it's very, very hard to believe. And certainly if you're one of the soldiers in Gaza, it's hard to deal with. We follow this, my son and I both follow this guy on Telegram and on Twitter. He's a meteorologist and he's thrilled when there's rain coming. And so he said last night that there's a series of rainstorms heading our way, like one day, that basically for the next 2 weeks it's going to rain on and off fully. And he's thrilled because meteorologists love rain in Israel because it's something to talk about, etc. In the middle of the summer, meteorologists don't have much to do. There are no hurricanes or anything else. My only comment and thought was, what about these poor soldiers sitting in Gaza in the rain? It's not exactly walk in the park, not to mention the Gazans who are living in tents and everything else. So rain is not necessarily a good thing. It's good for our agriculture and it's good for the Kinneret, but um, it has a lot of negatives at this point. Any rate, where do we stand now? That's the question. It's a question that's on every Israeli's mind because no one quite knows where we stand. Gadi Eisenkot, who was the um, chief of staff of the army 3 times ago, and whose son was lost in Gaza, and is part of the war cabinet, gave a long interview on Thursday night to a program called Uvda. It was an hour-long interview on all sorts of topics and the personal loss that he felt and everything that's involved in that. But also, he was asked a straight question: is the government telling the truth to the Israeli people? And his answer was no. So where do you live? Where are you when you have that answer? How do you deal with it going forward? Very hard. It's also hard to sort of judge things because on one hand, all of our military um, correspondents are pretty much rah-rah army. I mean, they tend um, not to live not to talk about bad things that are happening, criticize the army in any strong ways. Part of that has to do with, of course, the issue of access, something we know well in all of journalism. You don't want to blow your sources. If you criticize your sources too much, you'd lose access. Part of it has to do, of course, these people, they've been working with them for years. And so the generals, etc., I wouldn't quite call them their friends, but they know them very well and they have a certain relationship. So there is very little criticism. Now, maybe there's no criticism due. I don't know. But most Israelis would have thought that at this point things would have been further along. Let's put it that way. Eisenkot said something that was um, very depressing. Let's put it that way. He said that there is no chance, he doesn't think, or no real chance. So he didn't say no chance, but no significant chance of a rescue of the hostages by the army. And of course, all of us, I won't say dream of that, but we wake up in the mornings hoping that we'll hear news like that. And he's basically saying, um, stop your dreaming because it's not going to happen. The army is not going to be able to do that because they're too deep, too much surrounded by Hamas, and in my opinion, probably not even on Khan Yunis where we're looking, but that's a different issue altogether. We are destroying tremendous amounts of the infrastructure of Hamas. The tunnels, many more tunnels than we had thought. It's actually depressing. I don't know what the right word is. How our intelligence on Gaza has been so poor. There's so many things that's surprising us. The tunnels, particularly the amount of tunnels, the depth of the tunnels. The fact is that from the air, we could never destroy these tunnels. These tunnels can only be destroyed by entering them and placing charges deep in the tunnels. I mean, you could probably, Nikudatit, one tunnel destroy from the air the same way you have bunker buster bombs, one bomb after another, but that would require an incredible amount of effort to find all these tunnels from the air, and it couldn't be done. So the tunnels are the one thing that we're destroying, and we're also destroying most of their workshops for building rockets, for building all sorts of weapons. We're taking thousands and thousands of weapons from them. All that is good. All that is progress, to say the least. But the one thing we're not doing, or the two things we're not doing, is we're not able to reach and find the leadership of Hamas, and we're not able to find the hostages, obviously. And if we know where they are, wherever they are, we feel that, maybe we find some, we feel that the chances of successfully rescuing them as opposed to getting them killed in a rescue are too high. Maybe that'll change. The interesting thing, we're going to get to Lebanon in a minute, is as poor as our intelligence is on Gaza, it is really good in terms of Lebanon. And I'll get to that in a minute, but we seem to really have good intelligence what's going on in Lebanon, and we're able to target the right people. Our intelligence on Iran is also tremendously good. I guess the lesson here ultimately is, since the conception, the concept was that Gaza was not going to be a problem, we didn't put the resources that we did, intelligence-wise, that we did in terms of Lebanon and Iran. And I guess when you put the resources, you get results. We did not put those resources in Gaza. We also have a whole bunch of different technologies that were sort of half developed in terms of the tunnels and other similar things. And they were half developed again because it was Gaza. It didn't get the sort of priority that was necessary. So we were clearly not ready for this war in terms of all the technological things and in terms of our intelligence. And we're paying the price at this point for that. At the moment, there does not seem to be a hostage deal on the table that is doable. There was a proposal made today for a phased hostage deal where in stage one, there would be a 90-day ceasefire. The older hostages would be released first. In return, Israel would release a significant number of prisoners. Then in stage two, Israel would pull back to the borders of Gaza, not clear, but move out of the cities in any case. And then the Hamas would release the women soldiers and other women that might still be there. And then stage three, Israel would pull completely out of Gaza and release a lot of prisoners, and Hamas would then release the men who are of considered army age, and therefore they consider them part of the army, even though they're not. Both sides said it was a no-go. The Hamas wasn't interested in the plan on one hand, and the Israeli government wasn't interested in the plan on the other. The hostage families are getting more and more desperate. The feeling is that the government is not willing to do what's necessary. And of course, what's necessary, and this is why it's so difficult, what's necessary is to lose the war in order to get the hostages back. That's what it amounts to. If Israel was to pull out of Gaza right now with guarantees it would not go back in and all the things that related, and released all of the security prisoners it's holding, that would be a tremendous victory for Hamas. So we destroyed some of their infrastructure. Well, that also could be rebuilt, but they will have won the war. And maybe it's worth it to get back these 100 people. I don't know. It's not my child. It's not my husband. It's not for me to say, but that's why it's such a difficult decision, because to get back these 100 people under the conditions that Hamas is willing to accept is to accept defeat in the war. And then you have to ask yourself, what about the almost 200 soldiers that have died so far in the war? To what goal did they die? On the other hand, the war is also not bringing us any release. We said, once we get in there, the pressure will be so hard on Hamas, then they'll make a better deal for releasing them. I never believed that because this is their card. Why would they possibly want to give up their card, which is the soldiers, which is the hostages also, all the hostages. But so I don't see them doing that and coming to any sort of agreement in terms of that. It's a terrible situation. That's the reality. It's a terrible situation any way you look at it. It's a terrible situation for the people of Gaza. It's a terrible situation for Israel. This was not a war we asked for. It wasn't a war we planned, and it's a terrible war on many levels. It has cost us less casualties than we expected, but a lot of that is mis. It's not true. In other words, it seems like a lot less. What's happening, I think I wrote it in the past, is the field medicine is so good that uh, so many people who would have died in any previous war are succeeding in getting to a hospital and living in this war. There are doctors in the field that are immediately giving first aid of a very significant, level, and there are helicopters that are immediately the people who are grievously wounded are being evacuated to the best hospitals in Israel, and they get there in 20 minutes. And if the soldier lives through the initial encounter, there's a very good chance, not always, obviously, we've had soldiers die in the hospitals too, but there's a very good chance if he lives through the initial encounter, he will be saved. Of course, he may be um, seriously injured to say the least. Last night, one of the TV shows was interviewing a soldier who was brought by helicopter to Ichilov, which is the hospital here in Tel Aviv, the best hospital, in what's called Matzav Anush, which is critical condition. Anush is almost dead, basically. And the doctor saved him, but he lost both legs. But he has this positive attitude, and that the fact is that he was lucky because he was saved. He's one of these guys who has this positive attitude, and of course, today with technology, he will probably be able to get artificial legs that will probably be pretty good actually in the end. So, but a long, long recovery to say the least. And there are thousands of soldiers who've been seriously wounded, and that doesn't even include the PTSD that so many soldiers have. They're trying to deal with it, but there are no psychologists in the country. That's the reality. We have a country that has PTSD. So many people have um, been impacted by this war on, all the people who've had to move out of their homes. We're talking about 150,000. All the people who had to dodge missiles, and here in Tel Aviv wasn't particularly bad, but in places that were closer to the border, the people had close calls, and some people were wounded by some of the missiles. So you have thousands and thousands of people who have PTSD of some level or another from this war so far, and how it's going to be dealt with is a serious concern, um, serious challenge. That's what's going on in Gaza. Um, I wish I could tell you how it's going to end because I don't know. I don't know how it's going to end. I don't know that we can. Uh, can we can we eliminate? Reach the goal that we set upon ourselves? We clearly probably cannot reach both goals. It's going to be almost impossible to eliminate Hamas as a military force and a political force and get back the hostages. I don't really see how that's accomplished without some sort of miracle. Um, we haven't had too many miracles in the last couple of thousand years, so maybe it's time. I don't know. But that's really realistically the only way we're going to be able to get them back is if a miracle being that some military operation becomes possible and we succeed at it. Um, okay, so that's where we stand with that for the moment. I'll come back to the political issues and the issues with the United States in a minute. The North. So the North, uh, so the North um, continues to be um, continues to be a serious problem to say the least. Today there were various Nuntet, which is anti-tank missile attacks on various um, various communities along the northern border. The problem with those type of rockets, or they're actually missiles, is there's practically no defense. In other words, when they fire a rocket, it goes up and it comes down, and usually our anti-missile system, anti-rocket system can intercept. Uh, these are line of sight. In other words, they can only hit communities that are within line of sight of the border, within about 15 kilometers, and they can only hit targets that they can see. So if you can see a target through a um, magnified view, you can hit a target that way. It's very lethal. And there's, like I said, there's almost no defense for it. Armored vehicles have some defense. In other words, an armored vehicle has a system that can um, send out an rocket against incoming missiles, but that's on a vehicle, very expensive systems. It's not on houses. It's not on people. So there is no good defense against that. There is a good defense, of course, against rockets, and they haven't succeeded. And then there are the drones that Hezbollah has been sending in. All but one of them was down before it could do any damage. The one that did damage did minor damage. And again, it's a difficult situation. We, we have good radar systems, but it's very difficult to see a drone near the ground. The clutter that you get from ground on radar from the ground is very, very difficult. And while Israel has, I mean, I've seen it at trade shows, has developed some very excellent um, radar systems for, let's say, airports. They sell these systems to defend against in airports against drones. They weren't thinking about warfare. They were thinking about idiots flying a drone near an airport, right? That's not a very good thing for pilots and planes. So Israel has a system for doing that, but it doesn't work against the whole border. It works against a specific place. So that's we don't have that, and that's a problem. We have been very successful in the last week or so in killing specific people, specific Hezbollah people in southern Lebanon. We didn't officially do it, but clearly we most likely. I don't think it was, anyone else who killed the people from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard yesterday in Damascus. We killed one of the Hamas people who coordinates with them. Um, so, um, so we've been very good at doing that. One of the big questions was a couple of days ago, someone asked me, well, are we trying to escalate so that we go to a full-scale war? Or are we trying to show them that if they go to war, we're very effective at killing them? That was an open question. I took the view that we're trying to show that we're trying to create deterrence, and that's what we were doing. So far, that's been the case. So far, we've not seen any massive response on behalf by Hezbollah against the attacks that we've done successfully. Um, again, it looks like, and I say this very carefully, Hezbollah does not want a full-scale war. However, we have this problem. We have 100,000 people who are not living in their homes along the northern border, and we have towns and villages that are being slowly destroyed by missile fire. So how long can we let this continue? There were reports, I think, in the Washington Post that Israel said it will give until the end of the month, and if not, it will take action. The problem is we've done that before. We've gone into Lebanon a number of times in history. At no time did it end well. The last Lebanon war was considered, in retrospect, a success because it gave us 17 years of quiet, basically, along the Lebanese border. But it didn't stop Hezbollah from moving closer to the border against, the UN resolution that ended the last war. So I don't know. I don't know what the best way um, what the best way forward is. I think I've written, I don't think we're ready for war in the north. I don't think we're ready in terms of a civilian population, from the possibility of what will happen in terms of rockets and missiles on Israel. Um, I just don't know how, I'm not privy to the information of the estimates of how good our defense systems are, and uh, how many rockets slash missiles are likely to get through if we go to full scale war or not. But we don't have extra, we don't have extra generation capacity in terms of our power plants. If we lose one of the main power plants because it's hit by a successful attack, a lot of us are going to be in dark for a long time. So those are the sort of things that I just don't know that we have the ability to go to war at the moment. But we don't have the ability to leave us either. Even the biggest doves say we can't continue forever, allowing Hezbollah to push us off the top, 5, 6, 7 kilometers of our northern border, and say people can't live there. So that's really the biggie. Are we going to go to war in the north, which will be difficult and costly and everything else I can give in a list of things, or is it possible to reach a political settlement? So far, Nasrallah has not been willing to reach a political settlement, but we don't really know what his red line is or isn't, and whether he's willing to chance a full-scale war. And then we don't know the impact of what Iran wants. We have, to change directions a second and talk about the Houthis. The Houthis have managed to bring the United States fully into this war in the sense that um, the United States has been attacking the Houthis almost every night at this point. And from reports from Washington in the last day or two, it's been decided to up the attacks and start full-scale attacks on the Houthis to try to stop them from their uh, interruption of sea commerce. Look, this has been a traditional role of the United States going back to the Barbary pirates, Barbary Wars, first and second. The United States has been doing this since the beginning of the 19th century. So um, it's something to it's a role of the United States and the U.S. Navy, and only the U.S. can do this. But on the other hand, no one really knows how much Iran is pushing them to do it. My guess is a great deal. Iran wants to get everybody involved and try to keep itself out of it as much as possible. I have to say their attacks last week on Pakistan and at the same time in Iraq and Syria seemed a little bit strange. I'm not sure why they wanted to create a crisis with Pakistan, but they want to show they're strong, I guess, and so they fired missiles in every direction at whatever they thought was a potential problem for them. Finally, let's talk about the U.S. Biden and all of those things. Biden and Netanyahu have always had a, a rocky relationship, let's put it that way, although they've known each other for a long, long time. Biden obviously came to our aid immediately and is probably the most popular president in Israel's history, because he's the only president that came during a war. He's turned on the spigots in terms of military aid, and it hasn't stopped. Daily, their planes landing with munitions and other products, and there have been 7 or 8 ships full of those products. There's a limitation again. Because of the Ukraine war, there's a limitation of how much armaments exists in the whole world, but that's a separate but important factor. Biden has always believed in the two-state solution, and Biden also has been trying to work with the moderate Sunni states to try to create a coalition. He needs something in order to uh, move forward, in order to get the Sunni states like Saudi Arabia on board to potentially rebuild Gaza, and on board to create relations with Israel. He needs some sort of plan going forward that includes some sort of two-state solution. Now, he in some levels is trying to go over the head of Netanyahu and to the Israeli people. The problem with that is the Israeli people right now are not exactly standing in line clapping for a two-state solution. Nobody trusts the Palestinians at this point to have a state. On the other hand, nobody's come up with an alternative solution. And someone asked me, one of the readers emailed me and said, do I believe in a two-state solution? My answer, and it's been my answer for a while, it just got worse on October 7th, is I don't think there's any other solution, but I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. And that's the sad fact. I do not see that there is no other plan that's ever been proposed that could possibly work. Can this work? not with the level of hatred that exists at the moment. Can we change that? It would require a multi-year, multi-effort on many different levels to change that. And I don't see any Israeli government, not forget about this one, but anyone coming up with a plan that will, span a generation and could actually be implemented. But maybe that is my opinion, the only solution. Um, but again, Bibi is trying to use a fight with the United States for his own political benefit. When he spoke about the fact that after me, Yom Hacharai, when the day comes when I said, I hate to talk about myself in the third, person that there'll ever be a day after me, but the day after me will be a Palestinian state. So he's trying to run or gain support on the fact that only he stands between Israel and a Palestinian state. Only he can stop a Palestinian state. And if he has to fight with Biden, all the better. Because he can fight with Biden, show I can fight, I can stand up to President Biden, I can stand up to the Americans, nobody else can. And that's basically his political strategy going forward. The fact that he has a political strategy going forward in and of itself is a bit hard to believe, but it is where we are, and um, I don't see it changing. Lastly, someone asked me um, the question of, is there a way to Bibi to be forced out of office? And the answer is he's done everything he can to make sure that um, that his coalition stays together is 64 votes. The only way for something to change is A, to find five tzaddiks, in other words, um, five people within the Likud or more willing to vote against him, or for Shas to decide after all these years of a partnership that it's time to go. I don't see either happening. On the other hand, he is incredibly unpopular, and all his attempts to get becoming more popular have failed tremendously. Because besides for the besides for all the things that took place before October 7th, after October 7th, the government has not exactly been a shining example of efficiency and decision making and making those decisions in the right way. So he is extremely unpopular, uh, but he's in power. And it's very hard to see how we get him out of power, if at all. But on the other hand, Israeli politics change from day to day, and who knows what will happen. Okay, that's what I have to say. It leaves us a half an hour for questions. Please do the raise hand thing, and hopefully I will see you, or Amy will see you and tell me to call on you because you. Amy in Israel. Um,
Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm in Jerusalem. Um, Question, which you may not have an answer.
Speak up a little louder if you could.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, just a little louder
If
though. So it's
right, sorry. If Trump were to get into office in November, and if all of this in Israel real were still continuing, what might that scenario look like? Which, of course, I know it's a long way off, and I don't even want to think about it, but it's a topic that has come up since I've been here in Israel. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are.
okay, so two parts of that. First of all, a year from now is a long, long time. Literally, Trump inauguration would take place a year from yesterday. I think it would be some version today. What's today? Today is the 21st. Yes, the 20th, January 20th. If Trump was to win the election, he'd be inaugurated a year from now. That's a long time. I can't possibly imagine the situation Israel couldn't. We could continue this for a year, but okay, let's just say let's just say that's the case for the sake of argument. I don't know. I mean, look, Trump doesn't like Bibi either because Bibi lied to him, and he doesn't like being lied to, even though, the reality is, um, my fear of Trump vis-a-vis Israel is not so much his policy per se, but the fact that, it's chaos and there's no policy altogether, and he wants to pull out of NATO and do all sorts of things that will weaken the United States on the world stage. A weaker United States on the world stage is weakness for Israel. Um, the ability of um, the ability of President Biden to get international actors to work with him allows allows him to do more and have more effect on the international stage. And of course, the fear is that Trump would not be able to do that because of how much he's quote unquote loved in the world. So we'll have to see. But again, it's a year away. I think we'll have other problems a year from now, to be quite honest with you. Paul,
Yeah, so Mark, what you said before about a kind of a long-term two-state solution, I listened to your I-24 commentary last night, and you made the point that this could be is a generational thing, could take 20, 25 years. I happen to agree with that. I think it's going to need just a total educational change amongst the Palestinians. So let's say there were an Israeli prime minister, whether it's Netanyahu or someone else, who went to Biden and said, I agree with you. We do need a two-state solution, but it's going to take this long generational change. The Palestinians clearly hate us. That has to be purged, and this won't happen, 20, 25 years. Do you think an American president like Biden or anybody else would kind of understand and agree to that long horizon?
I think they would, but it would have to be there have to be a plan. They'd have to say, okay, it's going to take 25 years to get statehood, but this is what's going to happen in the first 5 or 10 years. We're going to remove certain restrictions. We're going to make sure that the children of Gaza. I mean, look, there's simple, stupid things we could do. Not Gaza, West Bank, for instance. I don't understand why we don't open up a beach for the children of the West Bank and totally fence it in completely, but by running shuttle buses from the West Bank to this beach somewhere along Israel every single day, so the children of the West Bank get to go to the beach. I mean, it's a small thing, but it's like one of a million small things that we could do that would just each one not giving them a beach is not going to make them love us. Don't get me wrong, but we have to think and say, okay, it's going to take a generation. What can we do over this generation to change those views? We obviously have to stop the marauding settlers from attacking Palestinians, and all those sort of things have to stop, and we have to find ways. And settlements can't keep on encroaching on Palestinian land and all of those type of things. But put that aside for the moment. But we need a plan that says, okay, they hate us today, and they have good reason to hate us. Let's be honest. If you were a Palestinian, you'd hate us too. That's the reality. You can argue the fact that we have the historic right. We can argue the fact that they made all the wrong decisions throughout their history. Their leaders have made all the wrong decisions. They couldn't take yes for an answer. They couldn't take yes. They couldn't accept the partition plan. They couldn't accept anything ever since. Not once did they accept anything. They wanted, they wanted everything, and they ended up with nothing. If they would have agreed to any one of the many different compromises over the last 70 years, they would have had a state a long time ago. But that doesn't affect the 12-year-old Palestinian living under occupation. The only thing he knows is our occupation. So we need to find a way that says, okay, these are the population. We know they hate us. Let's try to see if they can hate us a little bit less. Let's take every action we take. Let's make sure we take in mind the fact that we're trying to do something to decrease the hatred, to get more of them to like us in some form or another. Look, we succeeded with the Arab Israelis. They don't love us, but they're part of us, and they're proud to be part of us. I
So
think
would this
it's possible, it's doable, but it requires a government effort at long-term thinking that we just haven't shown ever. So I don't know.
would this plan presumably include benchmarks that they have to meet?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The benchmarks that they'd have to reach, the benchmarks that we'd have to do. It's in our interest. It's in our interest to decrease the hatred. Can we? How much of it is religious based? Once you throw religion in, it's a whole other ballpark. Religion is a bad influence on politics, wherever it is. Anywhere in the world, mix religion and politics, you get bad things. It's bad in America, it's bad here, it's bad all over the world. If we can if the religion isn't a major part of it, um, we might have a chance. But I'm not optimistic. I'm really not. So maybe
Thank
in
you.
terms of like I've said on I-24, and I say again and again, maybe in the life of our grandchildren, maybe. Abby, Leighton.
First of all, I want to say that I really appreciate your comments on the two-state solution. That was just excellent. Thank you. So I just watched the whole ICJ trial, the whole 7 hours. And I keep coming back to what you said a couple weeks ago about Israel needing to put in $100 million into a media program so that the rest of the world would not hate Israel so much. So living in the United States, especially in Portland, Oregon, I'm really concerned about the climate here in terms of Israel. And I don't know, I just would like to open that up. It's pretty extreme here. And I'm seeing that happen all over the world. And it's pretty disheartening. It scares me.
Yeah, look, it scares everybody. It shocked Israelis, to be honest with you, because the mix of between anti-Israel and anti-Semitism is a difficult combination, and how break it out. If you say that the only people in the world who are not entitled to a state are the Jews, well, I think that's an anti-Semitic statement ultimately, right? I mean, if you say Israel does bad things, okay, I say Israel does bad things. It doesn't make me an anti-Semite. It doesn't even make me anti-Israel. It says that we're not a perfect country. We're not a perfect people. Jews do bad things. Some Jews do bad things. Like, we're not perfect. But you say Jews as a whole do bad things? Well, that's anti-Semitic. I don't know. I don't have the answer. I've been surprised. I mean, I've been writing about anti-Semitism and the history of anti-Semitism in America since my college days, which was more than a few years ago. And I thought it was over. I truly thought it was over. I thought 20 years ago, when we went to Judeo-Christian society, first for PC reasons. In other words, there used to be the Christian nation, and then at some point it started saying Judeo-Christian. Christian, it's Judeo-Christian. And I believe that it was being said enough times that it was becoming ingrained that Judeo-Christian and Jews were part of the tent. Well, we seem not to be part of either tent. On the far right, we're not white enough. On the far left, we're too white. And we're Jews, ultimately. And in terms of Israel, look, the images are bad. There's no question about it. Now, if you would have taken the images of any place that it's been in war, any country any place that's been in urban warfare in the last 50 years, the images will be bad. Urban warfare is a terrible thing. It's a particularly terrible thing when the other side uses civilians as shields, basically. The results are not going to be pretty. I mean, the reality is, if you take the numbers that they give, which is 24,000 dead altogether, give or take, and you take the number that we believe are Hamas members, which is 9 to 10,000, you're talking about 1.4 civilians to every soldier, quote unquote, dying. The UN average for urban warfare is 1 to 9, 9 civilians to every soldier that's killed. So it's terrible, but it really isn't. I mean, it's bad when any civilian gets killed, right? It's any child that dies, it's a terrible thing. We all agree with that. But it's urban warfare. It's the only warfare that Hamas is allowing us to fight. So is it really as bad as people are making out? I don't think so. But who am I to judge? I cry practically over every Israeli soldier that dies. I don't cry over every Palestinian that dies, but that's life. That's the connection you have. It's the fact that every Israeli soldier could be my friend's son, my son, anyone else. I mean, it's different. It's a different connection altogether. So I don't have a good solution for you. And I'm sure in Portland, it's worse than it is on average in the United States. So, you're in that sort of place. Michael Ross.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, can you hear
speak
me?
up though. We can just barely hear you.
Okay. Many years ago, there was a really radical solution for southern Lebanon, which was the SLA living in southern Lebanon, and that seemed to work very well. And I never understood why it was abandoned. Is anybody Why, A, why was it abandoned? And B, is it any kind of solution now?
Okay, so the reason it was abandoned was twofold. It was abandoned and one for international pressure because the SLA only succeeded in there with Israeli military assistance and with the fact that the Israeli military was there. So that was part of it. Part two, is the fact that um, part two is the fact that we were being hit by IEDs by Hezbollah on a regular basis, and we were losing soldiers on a regular basis in southern Lebanon. Part of the reason we pulled off in 2000, that when Ehud Barak moved us out of Lebanon, was because the price we were paying was not small. And so we pulled out for both those reasons, and it's also international pressure. So I'm not sure how well it worked, but keep in mind something else. The SLA were people from the neighborhood. In other words, it's not like in Gaza there was the equivalent of the SLA. There are no Gazans who are Christian, and whatever Christians used to be in Gaza are long gone. And so there is no group that's equivalent to the SLA.
No, I mean to use them in southern Lebanon as an answer to the north.
Yeah, but they all moved to Israel, the ones who survived.
But they could then move just across the border, and at least it would be a local population who know the area.
You think after living in Israel for 20 years they want to move back to Lebanon? I mean, the ones that, I mean, some have moved back to Lebanon over the years, but the ones that have successfully been integrated into Israeli society, and we did integrate them and accept them because they were our allies. We weren't always great to them, I have to say. We made mistakes, but I don't see them volunteering to become our mercenary troops in southern Lebanon. So it's a nice idea, but I don't think it's realistic, to be honest. Nancy.
Okay. Sorry to intervene. Can I add something about southern Lebanon, the SLA, Drom Lebanon? I was in the Israeli army on the border when Israel left, and I was there when all the Tadalnikim came into Israel. They ran for their lives. They were considered enemies of Lebanon, and they ran to the border in a way that Israel couldn't even handle. And they're still in Israel. There are many in Israel, men who left Israel, but they cannot go back. They would be killed for being traitors to Lebanon and Hezbollah. They worked with Israel.
Yep. No, the idea is that Israel would reoccupy that bit of land, and then they would live there.
Yeah, but we've tried that, been there, done that. It hasn't worked. That's part of the problem. One of our biggest problems is we've tried various things, and nothing really has worked, per se. That's the story of our lives, I'm afraid. Nancy.
I had a question about President Herzog's role in all this. Last week at Davos, he was asked about Biden and Netanyahu's discussions. And apropos the two-state solution, the quote that I saw was that President Herzog said something like, "No Israeli in their right mind has the bandwidth to even think about a two-state solution right now." And I was very disappointed in that, because obviously people on the street can't think about that, but isn't that what leaders are supposed to be doing? And so why didn't he make more of a forthright statement about the lack of leadership or the need for leadership to take a long view and so forth? I just wondered what you thought.
Okay, so two things, of course. The president's job is semi-ceremonial and semi to represent the people in a general sense. I mean, Herzog obviously came out of the Labor Party and was the head of the Labor Party at some point along the way previously. Look, what he said was very true. That's part of the problem. In other words, the Americans are talking about a two-state solution. I said earlier in this discussion that, someday that is the only solution. But right now, Israelis are more worried about their security. I'm more worried that they don't want to give Palestinians any more power than they have now. They don't want to give, Palestinians more guns or more freedom or whatever you want to define it. One of the biggest fights right now, fight isn't maybe too strong a word, but disagreements in the government right now is what do we do about the Palestinian workers that used to be working in Israel? There are 160,000 Palestinians who used to come into Israel every day or for the week, and they're not coming. We we've closed the door for all but about 9,000 who are considered essential workers, and there are two big problems with doing that. Number one, our construction industry is ground to a halt. They provided most of the workers in the construction industry. Two, their financials are being hurt tremendously because they were bringing in good money. And every Palestinian who worked in Israel was supporting a family of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people. I knew one of them who, he was making enough money in Israel and doing relatively a menial job. I mean, not totally menial, but relatively menial job. And when he went back for the Muslim holidays, he would buy a sheep to give to the whole town, basically, because he was well off because he worked in Israel and was able to save some money. Right now, they're not bringing in any money, and the army and the Shin Bet are saying let them come back in because we don't want an explosion in the territories because they're not making any money. On the other hand, Israelis are scared. Do we want another 160,000 Palestinians moving around Israel? All of them have theoretically been checked by the Shabak, and supposedly they don't present a threat. And in the last 10 years, less than one handful have ever been involved in terror activities. But still, Israelis are afraid. Why do they all go out and get guns? Because people are afraid. And so fear is an important factor, and Israelis are fearful of a two-state right now. Israel doesn't want to give something to the Palestinians, especially if you remember what I wrote about, I don't know, 6, 7 weeks ago. The public opinion polls in the West Bank showed that some 81% of the Palestinians there supported what Hamas did. Is these the people you want to give, make your neighbors into a state? On the other hand, again, what other solutions are there? And so it's a terrible dilemma with no good solutions. And I think Herzog, look, I don't think the world fully understands, and I've said this, not only the world, but our friends. I don't think they understand what the impact of October 7th has been on Israelis, on Israeli psychic, on Israelis' willingness to see the other side. We don't care because we feel like we've been so damaged. And one last thing to keep in mind, and this goes back to the whole issue of relations and how we worry about Palestinian lives and everything else. What Hamas did on October 7th was as bad as anything the Nazis did in one day. Not the whole Holocaust, obviously, but that one day was as bad or worse than whatever the Nazis had ever done in one day. To Israelis, they're equivalent to Nazis. No one was ever concerned of how many, German civilian lives were being lost during World War II. And no one was concerned about the political solution after World War II to make sure they had freedom and everything else. In the end, of course, the United States made sure an independent Germany got started and made sure that it was a free country and there were elections there and made sure the United States had an ally. But that was after the fact. I mean, yes, there were people planning it in State Department, wherever else, but that's something else. Yeah. Yeah, you have your hand up, or was that from before?
Okay. Oh, sorry, that's from before. I'll take my hand down. Sorry.
Paul. Paul? Got a hand up from Paul?
He's on mute.
Okay. I just asked him to unmute.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. Yeah, sorry about that. So the other day in the Tel Aviv Diary, you printed this, which you called an insight on Hamas and Gaza from this fellow Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib, and it was incredibly illuminating. The really, inside information, so to speak, about what goes on in Gaza and what Hamas is doing and how the average Palestinian feels about it. Is this being publicized at all? I would think that this is something that the world should see, the UN. How public is this? It seemed like it's in Israel's interest to flash this all around the world.
The problem is that no one really cares what we say, right? We think that it makes a difference what we say. We take the journalists into the tunnels and we show them the tunnels where the hostages were being held and everything else, and no one really cares. And we have an audience, a small audience in the United States that makes a difference. Basically, President Biden, some members of the Senate and Congress and everything else, that makes a difference in what they know and what they think. The world public opinion, very hard to impact world public opinion, especially when we realize how little people know, right? In other words, go into a group of the pro-Palestinian college students and try to talk to them. And will you find that any one of them will have known that in 1947 the Palestinians said no to a partition, that they said no to Barack's peace plan, that they said no to Clinton's peace plan, that they said no, they didn't say anything to Olmert's peace plan? No, they don't know that. They think that history was completely different. And the other problem, of course, is because of the fact that all news sources have been undermined and everything is considered fake news, how do you possibly tell them this is the actual truth, right? How do you convince somebody that thinks that everything that they're hearing is fake news because it's coming from the man, whoever the man might be, that this is the actual truth, this is the actual history that took place? Doesn't seem to work anymore. I don't know, I don't know who's looked upon, I'm quite sure that none of these students have taken graduate school level history courses on Middle East given by some independent person who gave Middle Eastern history from a realistic standpoint, as opposed to from a Palestinian standpoint, or maybe from an Israeli standpoint. But I don't think it even happens anymore. So
you're saying even though this Ahmed Faoud Al-Khatib, that he is a Palestinian, right?
Right. Living in Los Angeles, though.
So even he would be discounted.
Right. How do we know that he's real? It was all written by Israeli propaganda. Maybe it was. I don't know. I personally don't know this guy. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's all propaganda. Maybe it's all fake. Maybe AI wrote it all. I mean, this is where we are right now. It's where we are in politics worldwide. It's where we are. The fact is that no one believes anything, or that people believe what they want to believe. I mean, I find it, as I watch American politics from afar, I found it astounding that the beliefs are so, what was it, 65% of the people who voted in the Iowa primaries did not believe that Biden won the election. We're living in alternative realities. I mean, you can like or hate Biden, but the fact is they didn't believe he won the election. Didn't say they didn't believe the election fair and square. They didn't believe he won the election. So we're living in alternate realities, both in terms of the Middle East and in terms of politics in generally. And it's very scary altogether. Very, very scary.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Mark, it's Michael Ader. How are you?
Good.
More of a comment than a question, but feel free to expand on it. I am an amateur photographer, and I think that the power of a photo is grossly underestimated, especially if you're talking about publicity or something. For the majority of people listening, the Americans, with 70 years ago, blacks were being burned in churches in the South, all sorts of horrific things. That didn't get the attention. 10% of the attention that a picture of a police dog straining at the leash, about to bite a black person did. The Arabs, for better or worse, or at least the press that goes in there, they're allowed to show pictures of bags of dead babies, of buildings destroyed by the thousands. There would have been horrific photos that Israel could have shown, but out of respect to the dead, out of respect to the privacy of the people, they didn't show it. But if you want to sort of get good publicity, you have to play the game, and the game is to show the horrors that were inflicted upon the country. What happened on October 7th is deeply embedded in the Israeli mind. Those photographs, only a fraction of them came out. We'll see a picture of a soldier standing in front of a square hole, and we're told it leads to the tunnels. You and I, everyone listening to this meeting, know what that means. But to the average American, that doesn't make your pulse go up. Your turn.
Well, there are two parts to that problem. Number one, yes, Israel decided not to show. A matter of fact, in advance of the Hague hearing, they created a special website with some of the pictures, but they can't be seen from Israel. Literally, Israelis have not seen 95% of the terrible photographs. More of the world have seen them than Israelis have seen it. That's the reality. Israelis, I don't say they don't want to, but the feeling is that that would make things even worse. And that's probably correct to some extent. Um, but also remember something. October 7th was years ago. To most of the world, that, well, okay, that terrible things happened on October 7th. That was very nice. Okay, that was terrible. It was terrible, but okay, what Israel's doing is ongoing. So what Israel's doing is ongoing. We present new pictures every day. And keep in mind the fact, and this is the other issue, is that almost all the journalists in Gaza, none of them are independent journalists. They're not people who the New York Times sent in. They're a stringer working for the New York Times, a stringer who is most likely a Hamas member who's working for the New York Times in Gaza. So what pictures are they going to get? But that's what's being shown. And, the media has been very good at accepting whatever information they get from Hamas. Less so from us. And again, they have the good narrative, good in quotation marks, obviously, the good narrative right now. We have October 7th, and we don't want to return to October 7th. And that's really our story more than anything else. So, it's a real problem. I agree. Michael Ross again. No, okay. Gary. Gary?
Oh, sorry.
Forgot to unmute. Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay. Wait. We got two people now. So let's start with Gary, since Michael didn't unmute in time, and then we'll go back to Michael afterwards.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Just the thoughts I've had about the terrorist act of October 7th. My sister lives in Zichron Yaakov, and I've spoken to her every day since then. And she told me about the imam in the city next to her was preaching pro-Hamas propaganda, and I was thinking, what is she doing? What are they doing? Their family doing, and thinking. And she doesn't tell me, but this Arab town is, 10 miles away. It's been peaceful.
A lot less than 10 miles. A lot less than 10 miles, by the way. I mean, if it's a town that I'm thinking of, it's more like a mile and a half. But okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not good. I didn't go measure it. It's close, and you walk over there, and there's no gates and no fences. But a marauding band of crazy people could attack her house any day, and that fear has got to still exist in particularly every woman in Israel, and the responsibility that their protective husbands, father, children, etc. That's got to be living today. So it's October 7th was just not an event, and it was just not a terrorist event. It was it reached the soul of every Jew in Israel.
No, absolutely. Look, there's no question it reached everyone's soul. It reached everyone's fear factor more than the soul. It reached our fear factor. The fear, we all knew the Arabs didn't love us, let's put it that way. But we didn't really internalize is they hated us to the extent that they would rape our women, behead our men, and everything related to that. That was something we did not expect. We didn't think we thought we were somewhere else. They might blow themselves up in a suicide bombing, but we really didn't expect this. So yes, that's been the wake-up call. That's the fear factor. That's the fear factor. Look, it hasn't happened amongst the Arab Israelis. Despite the fact that it could have, it hasn't happened, which is a good thing, obviously. But yes, there is that fear. And there is the fear, again, once you throw religion in, I don't care whose religion, but whoever's religion, anyone who's doing things because God told them in some form or another, whether it's to settle every inch of the land of Israel or to push all the Jews out of the land of Israel or kill all the people who are not Muslims or, you name it. If it's coming from God, it's terrible. Because who am I to argue with God, right? And that's one of the, I really think that, religion at this point has been very problematic in all these different ways. So again, it's a real problem. We've tried hard not to make this into a religious war, but maybe it ultimately comes down to that. I don't know. There is this saying in Islam, it's Dar al-Islam, what was once Islam will always remain Islam. That includes parts of Europe. So uh, how important that is, how strong that is, I don't know. I don't know what's in people's hearts, what's in people, forget the Palestinians, beyond that. I don't know. Look, we've made peace with lots of Arab countries. We've not made peace with lots of Arab people. And so how much religion has to do with that, I don't know. I want to make a side comment. I saw in the chat someone referred to the pictures of the cemetery that we just quote unquote destroyed. Just so you know, the reason we quote unquote destroyed the cemetery was looking for bodies of Israelis that might have been there, and this wouldn't be an issue if Hamas didn't trade in bodies and not return the bodies, going all the way back to 2014 when they didn't return the bodies of the Israelis they killed. So, okay, back to Gary.
No, it's me.
Michael, excuse me.
Yeah. I missed the first 10 minutes, so I apologize if you did discuss it. But to me, everything now depends on Egypt. And Sisi obviously is a very big dictator and can do what he wants. What do you think is likely to happen with Sisi and Egypt in terms of Rafah and all that?
Look, what he wants is nothing that will endanger his rule. That's number one. Number two, he wants the Suez Canal working again because this has been a terrible pain to the Egyptian economy. The fact that they've lost most of their income to the Suez Canal because of the Houthis, which is indirectly related to our war. So, so that's the second factor of what he wants. He doesn't want to go against his people. On the other hand, he would like, as much as possible, he would like to see this to end. And he would like Hamas to be destroyed because Hamas is tied to the Muslim Brotherhood, which is to his enemies. But at what cost? I don't know what he's willing to accept. So I don't really know. Sisi will go along with anything that makes sense that Israel will do, as long as it doesn't blow back on him. He doesn't want any blowback, and I think that's his greatest concern. So I think that's.
Will he react if Israel takes the initiative to approach the border?
No, I don't think he will. He'll protest, but I don't think he will. The problem again is that it's not so much we're worried about Egypt. There are 1 million people in Rafah, more than 1 million people in Rafah. So what do you do? How do you do it? How do you move into an area that that they can be fired upon from any place and there are people everywhere, and you weren't trying to decrease your civilian casualties if you can. So all these things are very, very difficult to do at this point, but I don't know any solutions without doing that. So we'll have to see. Last question I'll give to Paul at this point. We're past our hour. So before we all turn.
Yeah, I just want to go back to Iran. Obviously, Iran is a cancer in all of this. One of the things that's been printed is that the Houthis get, forget about weapons, they get the information about the ships, where the ships are from an Iran ship that tracks what's going on. Okay, and obviously that information that the Houthis get from Iran is crucial for the Houthis to be able to disrupt the shipping. So I know the U.S. doesn't want to get into a war with Iran, but it seemed this would be a perfect opportunity for international shipping purposes for the U.S. to just basically sink that ship.
Yeah, I agree. Again, the question becomes, what else comes as a result, right? Can you confine it to just that? The U.S. has been trying not to get into a war with Iran. Look, the greatest mistake in American foreign policy was the decision of George Bush the Jr. to attack Iraq instead of Iran. It was the wrong attack. He was not attacking. Saddam Hussein was not the danger to the world that the Iranian mullah regime has been since they took power, and not the danger to the United States. He could be dealt with. He could be negotiated with. He was a rational actor within his rationality. The regime in Tehran is not. They are a regime governed by religion and governed by some view of what Iran could be and what their religion should be. From Israel's standpoint, I think it would make Israel happier if the United States got involved directly with Iran, but the United States is war weary. That's the problem. How many wars can the United States fight over what period of time? As long as it's dealing directly with the people attacking the shipping, I think there's probably broad support amongst the American people for continuing the attack, especially since it's basically, other than the cost of the bombs, been without casualties on the American side. But going beyond that, what if Iran sunk one of America's significant ships? They have the potential capability. I mean, I have to say I've been positively surprised by the anti-missile capabilities of U.S. naval ships. I think that's been one of the interesting and positive surprises of this war. I think it'll give the Chinese pause also, because the Chinese naval strategy was they were going to sink the American fleet with missiles. But if the U.S. fleet can successfully defend itself against missile attacks, that changes their calculus as well. So it's been an interesting couple of weeks for the U.S. Navy, a very successful couple of weeks for the U.S. Navy, to be honest. And that's good. It's good for everybody.
Well, remember, an attack. If the U.S. sunk an Iranian ship, this is not an attack within Iran proper. Right?
Look, in 1986, I think it was, when the Iranians tried to close the Straits of Hormuz, the United States sank 2/3 of the Iranian Navy in a matter of hours. It's clearly within the U.S. capability to do that again. I mean, let's make things very clear. The U.S. Navy is the most powerful Navy in the world by a factor of many. And so no Navy has the capability of standing up to the U.S. Navy at this point. And but again, there are other factors involved, like Iran attacking the oil fields of Saudi Arabia, or Iran, closing the Straits of Hormuz to shipping, which I don't know what it's going to do to world oil prices.
I will have
certainly
to.
won't help President Biden's re-election campaign.
It was underneath
the price of gasoline goes up by 100% because he attacked Iranians.
But it's not practical.
Okay, everybody. I thank you all for attending. There'll be a copy of this, hopefully, with tonight's update. I don't know what other news is going to be tonight. It's been, thankfully, a quiet day, relatively speaking, here. And we'll do it again in 2 weeks. I'm afraid I don't see a situation where this is going to end in this 2-week period. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but I don't believe it will. So I thank you all for your time, and see you all in 2 weeks, and be in touch. And please continue sending feedback. I got lots of feedback. It's good to get it, and I try to answer everyone's questions whenever I get it, either in the newsletter or directly by sending an email back or a comment back.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.